Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at one of the best move updates for the Open Ultra League, TRAILBLAZE being given to Shadow Ampharos. TRAILBLAZE is a Grass-type Flame Charge clone, meaning not only can Shadow Ampharos now one-shot a Swampert with a single charge move, but every TRAILBLAZE you throw is going to continue to boost the Shadow Volt switch damage. I ran it as the safe switch with a Virizion Auroras core, and had great results in some Open Ultra League practice battles. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out TRAILBLAZE Shadow Ampharos. Tough lead in the first match, Virizion into Charizard, immediate save switch into Shadow Ampharos, and the opponent responds with Swampert. Swampert is gonna strike first as they make it to the Hydro Cannon, but the important thing is Hydro Cannon will not KO. I'm able to tank it, and I'm going straight for the TRAILBLAZE. Do they respect it? They do not! Swampert gets one shot, and Ampharos is now boosted. In comes Giratina. Giratina's not going to appreciate this boosted Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing does massive damage to the Giratina. The bad news for me is that my Virizion is absolutely useless here. So I'm just going to send in the Virizion as a damage sponge, and hopefully Auroras can sweep. Dragon Claw connects, my opponent makes a very nice prediction, throwing one Shadow Claw, then switching in the Charizard to catch the Leaf Blade where it's double resisted. And now I have Auroras versus Charizard. Even if Charizard full sends the Blast Burn here, I can survive this, so I'm going to let this through. They do full send the Blast Burn, I'm farming up to the back-to-back Weather Balls, and I'm looking to apply some pressure onto the Charizard. I need to start getting these shields down. The thing I do have to be mindful of is my opponent potentially burning the shields and doing a combo play with some energy from the Giratina. I'm farming up with the Auroras, they're firing off a Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw will get the shield, Auroras farming up, and the Charizard plays to the CMP tie, and thankfully I will not have to worry about the combo play, as now they're unable to switch. Weather Ball will get the KO, and my opponent is going to bring back in the Giratina. I'm switching into Virizion as they fire off the charge move here. It is going to be the Dragon Claw, and Virizion looking to make it to the Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade is resisted. It's not going to be enough to KO here, but it will get Giratina deep into the red. I continue to farm up with the Virizion. They're firing off another Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw will connect. Opponent, again, great move timing here, throwing one and the move. Dragon Claw KOs. It's a race. Powder Snow versus Shadow Claw, and Auroras takes the win. The bad leads won't quit as we lead Virizion into Cresselia. I'm throwing one double kick and save switching into Shadow Ampharos. I'm watching for a catch. Opponent goes for a Brutal Swing catch onto Obstagoon. Even though I don't have Focus Blast, I'm farming up to it, going for the TRAILBLAZE, and the threat of a Focus Blast is able to grab a shield. This is pretty nice, as future TRAILBLAZEs are of course going to do a lot more than the first one did. And now I can go for a boosted TRAILBLAZE into the Obstagoon. They know they can tank it, but that still does some solid damage. Obstagoon looking for the farm down, but I'm able to make it to a Brutal Swing. This is resisted, but it's double boosted. It gets the KO, and Ampharos wins not only switch advantage, but shield advantage as well. I'm going to send in Auroras. I will be able to tank Moonblast or Grass Knot here. Opponent ends up going for the Moonblast, so maybe they don't have Grass Knot. Again, farming up with the Auroras. In the back, it's Wall Rain. I was tempted to throw the Meteor Beam, but I'm going to need that Meteor Beam for dealing with the Cresselia later. They go for the Icicle Spear, and I'm going to farm up and go for the Leaf Blade. Both moves hit for super effective damage, but Leaf Blade does do more damage. Leaf Blade will connect into the Wall Rain, and I'm firing off Leaf Blade number 2, just looking to get rid of the Wall Rain. Opponent is going to let that go. They're trusting in the Cresselia to win this game. I'm just going to let this go, and now Aurora should be able to take me to victory. Looks like the opponent does have Grass Knot after all. In comes that Auroras. Auroras going for the Meteor Beam. Meteor Beam gets shielded by the Cresselia, but that just means the future ones are going to do more. This is a double boosting team, and it is so much fun to play. I'm farming up to a second Meteor Beam, and this one is going to hurt. Meteor Beam, massive damage onto Cresselia. It's the CMP tie, and my double boosted Powder Snows will be able to outdamage the Psycho Cuts, and at very low HP, Auroras takes the win. The bad leads will not stop as I lead Virizion into Shadow Charizard. Immediate save switch into Shadow Ampharos. Opponent responds with Reggie. Again, I don't have Focus Blast, but my opponents don't know that. So I'm farming up to the Focus Blast here, going for the TRAILBLAZE, and my opponent shields a TRAILBLAZE, and now my Brutal Swings will be boosted. I'm going to shield up here. Opponent goes for the Zap Cannon, but they get the attack debuff, putting my attack right back to normal. I'm now going to be firing off Brutal Swings. My opponent shielded a Trailblaze. They're probably not going to want to shield another grass move. I'm going to double shield here. I'm trying to make a play for switch. They go for another Zap Cannon, and again, they get that attack debuff. That is very unfortunate. I'm firing off the Brutal Swing, farming up, and going for yet another move. My opponent can shield if they're looking to try and make a play for switch here, but they are not. They let the Reggie go. My Ampharos does leave pretty healthy, but unfortunately is one stage debuffed. In comes the Charizard. I'm firing off the debuff Brutal Swing here. Charizard is going to let that go, and they will make the Blast Burn. Blast Burn will be lethal, and now I can align Aurorus onto the Charizard. In comes Aurorus in the back. It is Tapu Fini, and Tapu Fini and Jellicent are the two reasons why for this team, Virizion does really want to run Leaf Blade, as Leaf Blade is very, very helpful in those matchups. They'll be able to make it to the Moonblast due to the energy lead, but Virizion, with a fraction of HP, tanks that Moonblast like a champion and fires off the Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade gets the shield, and this is now going to be a tricky endgame here. I need to land a Meteor Beam on the Tapu Fini, and I need to not let them catch that on a Charizard. So I'm going to look to farm up and watch for the switch. Farm it up with Aurorus. In comes the Charizard. I'm firing off the Weather Ball, and I should have the Weather Ball plus the Meteor Beam here. Weather Ball KOs the Zard. In comes the Fini, and I do have the Meteor Beam loaded. Aurorus KOs a Water type, and that's a good game. Another battle, another lost lead. This time Virizion into Shadow Dragonite. Immediate save switch into the Shadow Ampharos. Opponent gonna stay in with the Dragonite, and Dragonite will fire off the Dragon Claw. These Dragon Breaths doing a lot of damage. I shield up the Dragon Claw, and I'm gonna return fire with the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing should be grabbing a shield back from my opponent. I'm farming up with the Ampharos. I go for the Brutal Swing, but it ends up caught onto the Cobalion. A very nice play by my opponent. I'm farming up with the Ampharos. Ampharos is not going to be able to threaten a fake Focus Blast, so I'm just going to settle for the Trailblaze. Trailblaze will get some chip damage, and the good news is I baited out the Cobalion. Cobalion would tear Aurorus to shreds. It's basically Aurorus' hardest counter, so it's definitely good to see it here and not up against the Aurorus in the back. They're firing off a Sacred Sword. I'm going to let that go, and I will be able to tank this Sacred Sword as well. My goal is just to leave with a lot of energy on the Virizion and threaten charge moves onto the Dragonite. In comes the Dragonite. I'm firing off the Sacred Sword here. This could be a potential Stone Edge, but my opponent does not respect it, and they make a beautiful catch, catching the second Sacred Sword onto Tapu Fini. This is going to be tough. Aurorus versus Tapu Fini. I'm farming up with the Aurorus, and unfortunately, at this point, I just don't really see a win con here. They go for the Surf, and that just does too much damage, and even if I went for the back-to-back Meteor Beams, I just get outpaced here, and unfortunately, Tapu Fini will be able to farm down my Aurorus and the Virizion. Moving into the next match, we finally see a positive lead, Virizion into Tapu Fini. Virizion can actually make 2 Leaf Blades before they even make 1 Moonblast. Opponent tries to go for a catch onto Registeel, and the opponent is absolutely core broken by Virizion. So I'm just going to stay in here as the Virizion, because I do have a secondary Tapu Fini counter in the back with my Shadow Ampharos. Sacred Sword is going to connect onto the Reggie firing off the Focus Blast, but I can very comfortably tank this. So I'm going to let that through, look to farm up quite a lot of energy with the Virizion to the back-to-back moves, and go for the Sacred Sword. Opponent is going to let the Registeel go, and my guess is they're going to be sending in their final Pokemon. They're not going to want to send the Tapu Fini into the loaded Virizion, and their final Pokemon is Shadow Gliscor. And unfortunately for my opponent, the alignment is just working out perfectly for me here. Gliscor gets the farm down, but now I have Aurorus onto the Gliscor, and they send in the Tapu Fini to be met with Shadow Volt switches from the Ampharos. I'm committing the shield in case they full send, and they do, going for the Hail Mary Moonblast, and now I can look to buff up my Volt Switch damage with Trailblaze. Trailblaze into the Tapu Fini, gets no shielded, I get the farm down, and now, even though these Shadow Volt switches are single resisted, they are now boosted. I'm firing off the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing will be shielded. Shadow Gliscor continuing to farm. I'm just going to let this go. They have to Earthquake to get the KO, and they do. Back in comes Aurorus, and all they have to do is shield when they make the Earthquake, and Aurorus will comfortably be able to secure the win here. So, after a lot of bad leads in a row, feels nice to have a favorable team comp. We've got a mirror match in the next game, Virizion versus Virizion. I do typically win the Virizion mirror match. As you can see, I do run a very high attack Virizion, and that does oftentimes come in handy in the mirror or when facing Cobalion, as the two Swords of Justice do have identical stats. They're going to be firing off the Sacred Sword. I'm farming up, going for my own, and I do get the confirmation that I do in fact win CMP. This is quite nice. I'm not going to leave super healthy, but I will leave with a little bit of health and the switch advantage as well, which is quite nice, considering that my backline gets absolutely shredded by my opponent's Virizion. I'm firing off the Sacred Sword. Opponent is just going to let that go. They send in Skuntank. I aggressively pivot into Shadow Ampharos. Ampharos farming up. Opponent going to send in a Mudshot Greedent, and I'm going to fire off the Trailblaze. Let's boost up this damage. Trailblaze connects. Trailblaze, again, does not hit for a ton of damage in neutral situations, but you are able to make up for it with the amount of damage you get from boosting your future attacks. I'm firing off the Brutal Swing. That gets shielded by the Greedent. Ampharos can't quite make it to the final charge move, as Greedent will fire off the Body Slam. But I decide, you know what? I still have 2 shields. I can shield this. Go for the boosted Brutal Swing. That does quite a lot of damage. Go for the Snipe with Aurorus, and I can't quite get there. I'm just going to tank the first move here. Opponent is running Trailblaze themselves. They're running Trailblaze on Skuntank. I farm up to the Meteor Beam, and I'm baiting with the Weather Ball. This is a big call, and I get the shield from my opponent, and now it's going to be a race. Can I make the Meteor Beam before they make the boosted Crunch? Aurorus farming up, getting to the Meteor Beam, and that will secure the win, as Meteor Beam will annihilate that Skuntank. Greedent has energy, but it's too little too late, as Crunch does not KO Aurorus. We see a massive core breaker on the lead in the next match, Virizion into Clefable. I'm going to immediately save switch into Shadow Ampharos, but I'm in quite a lot of trouble here. Opponent now going to send in Shadow Regirock, so the opponent running some serious spice. But if I remember right, the Regirock has nothing on what their final Pokemon is. Trailblaze connects, that does quite a lot of damage. I'm going to let this through. Opponent goes for the Stone Edge, and that does a lot of damage. These boosted Volt Switches are adding up. You know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to shield, Volt Switch down, and leave boosted with a massive amount of energy. And let's see what my opponent wants to do about that. They're thinking about it. They're going to send in Clefable, and I'm going for the boosted Trailblaze. Boosted Trailblaze into Clefable, gets the shield. Clefable cannot get the farm down, and now they're going to have to deal with a double boosted Trailblaze. We see the double shield from the Clefable, and at this point, I'm expecting that Aurorus will have the best play in the endgame. So I'm going to send in Virizion, basically to sacrifice it and trust in Aurorus to sweep. Moonblast connects, I send in Aurorus, and I will have to burn the final shield as Meteor Mash would hit for double super effective damage here. So I'm going to be shielding up, going for the Meteor Beam as soon as I get it, and the opponent makes a catch. Look at the spice. They catch onto a Sigilif, but watch this undercharge. I end up getting the absolute perfect undercharge, leaving with the boosted Meteor Beam. I don't think I could recreate that if I tried. Meteor Beam KOs Clefable, and that's a good game. Great lead in the final match, Virizion into Shadow Steelix. I'm going to overfarm by 1, go for the Sacred Sword, but my opponent reads me like a book, catching the Sacred Sword on a Jellicent where it's double resisted. Very nice play by my opponent. I'm going to stay in here with the Virizion, farm back up, and go for the Leaf Blade. Now here, arguably what I should have done was now bring in the Ampharos, but instead, I stay in with the Virizion and fire off another Leaf Blade. This should be grabbing a shield from my opponent, and now, at long last, I will send in the Ampharos. They're firing off the Shadow Ball here, which is fine, but then I am going to make a crucial misplay, which is I'm actually going to concede switch here. My thought is that I have Virizion, I have my Aurorus. Honestly, neither one is too terrible into the Steelix, so I hopefully shouldn't need switch advantage, but as you're going to see, switch advantage mattered a heck of a lot after we see what my opponent had in the back. So I am going to be firing off the Leaf Blade here. Leaf Blade is going to get the KO. What else is in the back but a Shadow Shiny Charizard? And at this point, I've just lost. Like, I can go for the Sacred Sword. I can send in the Aurorus. They're going to send in the Steelix. Steelix left with a Breaking Swipe, so they're now at 6 Dragon Tails, and I'm in an incredibly difficult spot where I think my only win con is to try and call a Breaking Swipe bait, so I do so. They full send the Earthquake, and yeah, there's just nothing I can really do here. I'm just going to bring in the Virizion. May as well just let them farm me all the way down here. But yeah, I feel like that could have been a winnable game, but just preserving switch advantage ended up being the thing that I needed to do. All in all, I think Trailblaze on Shadow Ampharos is a terrific addition. Trailblaze allows Ampharos to be significantly more flexible on the safe switch, as even if you're not necessarily running Trailblaze, the threat of a Trailblaze should be enough where if you farm up to it, the opponent can commit the shield. So whether you choose to run Trailblaze on Shadow Ampharos, I'm probably going to run it for the first couple days, or if you end up running other movesets, being able to understand that it's an option now, you can potentially, even if you're not necessarily running Trailblaze yourself, bait Swamperts into shielding if you're farming up to those 4 volt switches. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.